Okay, so I am Lavinia. I am a co-founder and a learning architect at Offbeat, a learning space dedicated to L&D professionals. And today we are going to talk about behavior change, a very important yet very complicated topic in our field. Just for me to know you're alive, can you please drop me an emoji? Can you wave your hand at the camera, raise your hand virtually, anything to know that you're here with us and you are ready to start things? Great, I can see emojis coming in the chat. Hello, everyone. Okay, this is not gonna be like just looking at the screen. I am gonna ask you some questions, and I hope you are here with me to explore this topic together. We do have a special guest today, Ross, which I'm gonna introduce in a second. But before that, what is it that drew you to this session? And feel free to type in the chat whatever thoughts you have. Are you interested in behavior change? Was the title of the session interesting? Do you know Ross? Do you know myself? Did you just want to see us? Did you not have anything else to do at 9:30 p.m. in the evening? Anything that's interesting for you? Behavior change is so difficult. Yes, indeed. General interest in behavioral science. Good. We are going to talk about behavioral science in learning and development. I do hope, Nicholas, that we are going to fulfill your interest. What else? I want to drive behavior change through a few projects, including learning. Awesome. Articulating how L&D interventions impact behavior is a very powerful way to get buy-in. Yes, yes, and yes. You're already getting likes for this. Behavior change is the secret sauce. Good one, Amy. No, Ross. I could see that. Some of you know her or you know me. Okay, awesome. Many, many reasons. Now, from our side, we can tell you that you are in the right place if you are a learning professional, either in-house or working as an external consultant, or you might be a facilitator, or just someone who's involved in some way or another in designing and delivering learning initiatives for different types of organizations. The second thing, and I'm glad some of you mentioned in the chat already, you are curious about behavior change. Then you might be aware already that some of the practices you are currently using might not be fulfilling the need for behavior change, which, just like Ines mentioned, is a very, very complex topic. Then you might have questions about how you could adopt behavior change practices, behavior science practices. And finally, something that I saw mentioned in the chat as well, you might be interested in our program, Behavioral Science for L&Ds, and you might want to know who is behind the program. So here we are. Now, let's do an exercise. I told you this is not going to be, at least in the beginning, just looking at the screen and not interacting. One of the most popular requests we get in L&D is to support people in exchanging feedback more often. So the question is, what are your steps in reaching your goal if you would get such a request? And again, please feel free to just write the whole process in the chat or just some thoughts that you have. And let's see, how are we approaching this very common, yet very, very complex request? Let's see. I'm gonna wait for a couple of seconds until you get a chance to write. Any thoughts that you have? How will you begin this project? Okay, we have a question from Amy. What behaviors are you wanting to see? Natalie, first define the behaviors you want to see. Robin, understand the gaps, identify barriers, obstacles, enablers, define what good, great looks like. And then Benjamin comes in with understand what good looks like, understanding how feedback is currently being approached, attitudes, create behavior tree. This is actually interesting. Maybe we can learn about that at the end. Identify current behaviors, drivers of current behavior through interviews, identify what could be starting point for change. Okay, already some really, really great ideas in the chat. Now, before we actually start exploring our own ideas, I want to very quickly give Ross the mic so she can tell us who is she and why is she here.
Thank you. I was looking for my unmute button, of course. Yeah, thanks for the intro. I'm Roos van Duijnhoven. You can just say Roos. The whole Dutch spelling of the word rose, the flower, is apparently it's tricky. But yeah, my name is Roos. I'm a behavioral scientist with a background in neuropsychology and behavior change. So basically, what I do is I study what shapes human behavior and how we can like shape the context and the variables that are influencing behavior to actually help people in changing their unwanted or unhealthy habits and make a positive behavioral change. So yeah, what I do is really I translate the scientific knowledge about behavior and change that or translate that into practical applications for interventions or solutions. I'm also co-founder of Nuance Behavior, which is a behavioral agency where we really focus on behavioral science and product design. So we help product teams create products that really, change behavior, not only improve engagement rates, but also really help people change their behavior outside of the product. And yeah, we work on topics in healthcare, but also financial well-being, sustainability. It's quite broad because in the end, behavior is in a lot of things. And yeah, I'm teaching this course on how to use behavioral science for learning and development together with Samuel Salzer, who is also co-founder of Nuance Behavior. But yeah, he sadly couldn't make it today, so it's just me. But in the course, it's got to be two of us, so no worries.
Yeah. And for everyone who knows Habit Weekly, you might know Sam from there as well, so you might be familiar with him already. Awesome. Thank you so much. We'll be back with Rose in a second, but we've talked to many L&D professionals, and we have heard that there are a couple of challenges to adopting and driving behavior change in our organizations. So if you were to think about your own context, are any of these challenges relatable? That's the first question. And then if yes, which of them? I can already see behind the scenes that there are some that are like win beyond any measure. I'm gonna just let the poll in for a couple more seconds. Okay. I can tell you that you're gonna feel as part of a community here, because it feels like there are lots of us that find some challenges in our organizations, at least some of them. Okay, 2 more seconds. Let's see. So I hope you're seeing now the results. The most common one is that I'm finding it hard to engage stakeholders to sustain behavior change long term. So this is a big one. Then I'm not sure what strategies and models to use in order to drive behavior change. Then we have, I don't have the time to measure the impact of behavior change interventions. And this is related to another big challenge in L&D, which is measuring our impact. Then we have, I don't have the time to identify the exact behaviors we want to change. And finally, my stakeholders don't approve of any other initiatives besides training, which I'm really glad it's so down on the list. But what we're going to do in the next couple of minutes is that we're going to ask Roos to walk us through potential solutions for these challenges. And then at the end, we're going to have some time for Q&A. But meanwhile, if you have any thoughts, I encourage you to write them in the chat, because we're going to keep an eye on the chat as well. Okay, so Roos, you can go ahead with the first challenge.
Thank you. And I was always afraid that you were going to say, I'm happy that so many people chose for this one, but for this first question. But yeah, it's good that that was actually a lower problem. So yeah, the first challenge that we hear quite often is that stakeholders, which can be your manager or people higher up that need to approve of something, don't want to approve of anything other than a training. And often we assume, especially in L&D, we see this quite often, like the typical way to do anything is by just creating another training, right? But actually training is only really a solution if the problem is a knowledge problem. So otherwise, if there's a different problem, like a behavioral problem, then different initiatives are the better solution. So when you're talking to your stakeholders, it's really important to understand or help them understand these different types of problems and how different types of problems need or ask for different types of initiatives. So that's the first part, like explain what a training can and cannot do and why a training might not be the right solution for your specific situation. And then second, it can really help if you can show some real world case studies of maybe other organizations that are similar to yours, or working in similar fields, similar topics, showcase those examples of how they did anything else in a training and show how this initiative can fit into your organization. So that could be a way. And then another thing to consider is maybe instead of just explaining or showcasing one example of a different initiative than a training, maybe you can select like your top 3 and give the stakeholders a say in which one they actually prefer. So instead of just proposing one, they can actually help selecting one, which maybe makes them feel like they have a little bit more control and ownership of the initiative. That might help. Yeah, so then the second challenge is that we don't always have enough time for identifying the behavior that we want to change. And I find this an interesting question. I actually want to turn it around. Like, do you have enough time to design a training or a different initiative without knowing the behaviors that you're trying to change? Because if you don't have the time to define the behavior, well, then if you skip that step, then what are you going to design anyways? Like, what is then the whole point of designing something if you don't know the behavior that you want to change? And if you don't even know the behavior that needs to change, then how are the people that are involved in your initiative or training, how are they supposed to know what they're supposed to do? So yeah, say you don't have time to identify the behavior, you're gonna design a training anyways, and say you have the best training in the world, like people that join your training have all the knowledge in the world, but that's it, like they don't do anything with that knowledge, then would you really be happy? I mean, it's great that they have all that knowledge, but yeah, if they don't know what they're supposed to do with it, then still nothing really is going to change. So yeah, instead of asking the question in this way, I actually want to ask the question back to you. Do you have enough time to create an initiative that isn't actually really focused on a specific behavior that you care about? And then, of course, I know this is not really a practical answer, but we have a course on this. So if you want to know a little bit more about it, then I can recommend our course, where we, of course, go a little bit more into, or not a little bit, we just go more into how we can identify those behaviors. And that doesn't necessarily have to take months to do. So
can you give me
training.
like a short nugget of what's going to be in the program? Like 2 ideas about, okay, let's say we have the time. How do we identify those behaviors? Like, again, 2 short nuggets.
2 short nuggets. Well, this also goes a little bit in the for the next challenge, but we're going to focus on the behavioral design process. So the whole process from doing a behavioral diagnosis of the problem to designing something and testing and implementing that further on. So yeah, I think it really depends on the specific situation and your specific problem to figure out if it's a behavioral problem that lies with the people that your target audience, or is it maybe something that has to do more with the system? So for example, we had a situation where people were filing a report in the data system, like they were filing it wrong or not complete. And yeah, they then wanted to design a training to help people understand how they're supposed to file it. But actually, after some interviews and some asking around, we figured out that their incentive system was focused on do so many applications and then you get rewarded with a bonus or so. So that ended up in people just filing stuff without actually checking if it's fully correct or complete. And therefore, it's not necessarily that people don't know how to file it, but it was just something in the system that was resulting in this outcome. So yeah, so many different things can happen. And by knowing how to diagnose those problems and doing some interviews or so, you can really get to the bottom of the problem, and then you can continue into designing a solution for it.
Thank you. Next up.
Next one. Yeah, I really like this one. I'm not sure what strategies and models to use in order to drive behavior change. Well, the thing is, I think everybody's hoping that I'm now just gonna like mention 1 or 2 models that I always use for all my projects, but that's sadly not the case, because there is just not one model or of behavior that's really perfect, because behavior is super complex and you just can't put that all into one like static model on paper. So there is just no model that's a perfect representation of real world behavior. So yeah, can't answer that specifically, but what I can say is related to what I just mentioned. You really need to start with the problem diagnosis. Like you really need to focus more on the whole process of designing for behavior rather than just zooming into a specific model already. Because yeah, you just can't shortcut your way to a good process or a good initiative, and you can't copy one initiative that worked really well here to your specific situation. So it's really about trying to understand and getting a better grip of the whole behavior change, behavioral design process. And then from there, you can start diagnosing the problem and identifying the related or relevant behavioral variables that are influencing your target behavior. And then you can start and go design and test interventions or initiatives to try and change the behavior. So yeah, like I said, this whole process we will cover in the course. So yep, another reason to join. Next one, I am finding it hard to engage stakeholders to sustain long-term behavior change. So I'm assuming that these are different stakeholders than the ones in the first challenge. These are more people joining your initiative or training or participating. So the thing is with motivating people is that when other people tell us to do something, we're a little bit less motivated to follow up on it compared to when we create our plan for ourselves to do something, right? So it's a really good idea to make people feel involved, feel like they have a say in the initiatives or the trainings or the strategies that you're planning to do. Because when they're involved and they really notice that their input is implemented into the program, then they're more likely to be committed than when it's a top-down process or something that they're just obliged to do. So really try to involve people and make them care about the solutions. I think that's also really good because they have then at least a perceived sense of autonomy. Like they have some freedom in how to design the learning process or the approach themselves. And that can also be really useful and effective because every person has a little bit of a different preference or learning style, right? So if you can figure out a way to ask that input from people, then you can really also give them the opportunity to create their own individual or like tailored learning style or preferred style, and therefore it fits better to the person and they're more likely to stick with it. So and I think another idea is to like for the sustained behavioral change. So after the training is completed, then how do you make sure that people are still using what they learned later on? You can also ask their input for that, and then start collaborating on creating some sort of game plan for how they're going to sustain the change. So some people might be motivated by having certain rewards or celebrations for milestones, like specific milestones that they achieved, or maybe for some people you need to provide some ongoing advice and support. Leave some room for flexibility, like for some people situations and their context or like life happens, stuff gets in the way. Leave some room for those changes, and then if someone can't use the skill that they learned, or they need a little bit more time to actually finish a task, then also try to give them the flexibility to do that and support them rather than just label it as a failure, because then they're gone.
I think I'm going to stop you a second here because I feel like you made two very interesting points. The first one about co-creation, and I've seen co-creation in practice in different moments of the design and delivery process. So I've seen stakeholders, not only learners, but they're people managers, for example, invited at the table to co-create the whole learning experience, behavior change process. So that can happen even before the delivery of whatever intervention you end up doing. Then what you're mentioning is that you can co-create the rest of the actual change process for the future, and you can ask people, okay, how we can support you further on, and see what they're saying. And something that I've seen play out very nicely in learning programs, even let's say that you end up doing a training, because it is what it is. Sometimes there's nothing to do about it. People are stubborn and you can't convince them doing otherwise. What I've seen as a use case is, okay, we're doing this training now, but let's maybe schedule follow-up sessions in which it's not about content in any way, but it's rather about that support that you're mentioning and hearing how others are dealing with stuff, and just continuously come back to those behaviors and that content and so on. So these are my two takeaways.
Yeah, exactly. And those follow-up sessions, like that can even just be a Q&A, like if people have questions in implementing some of the things that they learned at the training, then you can have a Q&A about it. But it can also be like this Q&A session can also be some form of accountability. Like if you learn from your co-students that they are implementing all the stuff that they learn during the training, well then, okay, then I might also continue doing it, or like there's this social accountability and maybe social support as well. So yeah, that could be a really good idea. Okay, then I do not have the time to measure the impact of behavior change interventions. Yeah, this of course really depends on the context, because yeah, sometimes you just don't have so much time, sometimes you have a little bit more time, sometimes you don't have enough resources. But yeah, it's hard to give a really concrete, specific answer to this one, given that it depends on the context. But I think in general, it's really good to try and be creative and pragmatic at the same time. In Dutch, we have the saying, roeien met de riemen die je hebt. Probably no one here is Dutch, but it means like rowing with the, okay, it actually doesn't really make sense to say this. The literal translation doesn't work, but it means, yeah, use whatever you have and make the best of it, basically. So yeah, I think with measuring the impact of behavior change, it comes a little bit back to what we talked about earlier. If you're going to do something over and over again, say you design a training, you give the training, you do multiple cohorts, but you do not measure the impact, like you don't have a feedback loop of checking if your efforts actually resulted in the behavior or the impact that you're aiming to achieve, then yeah, same as before, like if the time that you're investing is only in designing the thing, but not checking if you're designing the thing right, then that is actually a way bigger cost. Because then if you don't check the impact, then with every repetition of the training or every cohort, you lose the opportunity to check, first of all, if the thing is going well, if you have the right impact, but also to check if there's maybe room for opportunity to create an even bigger impact. And maybe more importantly, you don't even have the opportunity to check if you maybe have an impact, like a negative impact, or like something that you don't want people to do, like if the intervention or the initiative backfired. So it's really important actually to try and create the feedback loop, because yeah, it's even more costly to do a thing and not do it well. Yeah, so that being said, I think nowadays with a lot of tools like AI, there is, yeah, I can share if anyone wants to know, just reach out. There are a lot of tools that make it easier and easier to collect data. Still, they're not always perfect, so you probably need to see what is available to you, and then use those in a creative way. So use them together with other tools and try to make the best of it, and try to get as much input or as much of the insights that you actually need to determine if your initiative is impactful. So also really try to figure out which data points are important to you. Yeah, and of course, this is also something that we're going to explore in the course a little bit more. So yeah, come to the course if you want to know more.
Can I ask, because even when I remember when you shared this with me before this moment, I saw these words creative and pragmatic. And I found that the combination very interesting, because I feel we are very pragmatic usually with the way that we try to measure whatever we do. Never thought of the word creative. Can you give us an example of what does measuring in a creative way mean?
Measuring in a creative way, like I'm not sure if I have a specific example, but I just meant it more to say like pragmatic, as in we all know that, for example, surveys and user interviews, like all those things, and usually if there is a way to request feedback after training, it's through a survey, right? So that's all this known, all these known methods of collecting data. But I think being creative is about trying to find some alternative ways, which through AI and all the technological possibilities is, yeah, there are just way more opportunities and ways to gather your data, and then try to be creative about it in a way, like maybe make it a bit more fun. Like nobody really likes a survey, to be very honest. Those are often quite boring. Or if people fill them in, it's like, do you have feedback? No, it was fine, or something. Like it's quite hard to really get meaningful insights and responses from people. So be creative in a way that you maybe take a different route, or I don't know, go to your canteen if you go to the office, and put some physical thing there where people can put in some notes with their feedback, or try to be creative in figuring out what are really the most important data points and only ask about those. Like sometimes the stuff that's in surveys you don't really know, like you don't necessarily need to know which person this is, or well, depends on, of course, what you're trying to do with your initiative. But yeah, really try to be pragmatic in a way that you just use everything that you have available, and be creative in a way that you make it a bit more fun, a bit more engaging, and try to get the most responses as possible, in a bit more of a fun way.
Awesome. Thank you so much. Well, it seems like I'm having issues with technology today, no idea why. So we've explored a couple of solutions to the challenges that were mentioned at the beginning. And we're going to share this presentation with you, so you can just check it afterwards. I do want to offer us time for some questions. Before that, just like Ross mentioned a couple of times now, we are running this behavioral science for L&D program. It's 4 weeks. It's with herself and Sam Salzer. It's with live sessions every week, 2-hour live sessions. So there's going to be a lot of knowledge, sense making, and practice involved. And now I would really, really love to hear if there are any questions. I already see some really cool comments in the chat. And I'm gonna leave a bit of space for questions. You can go off mute, you can add your questions in the chat, you can raise your hand, whatever. We're quite informal here at Offbeat for whoever doesn't know us. But yeah, you can do whatever you feel to do. And meanwhile, Natalie was just sharing in the chat that she is co-creating a leadership development initiative with people managers. And it feels like, yeah, it's going to be interesting for motivation and buy-in. And she was also sharing that she had support from marketing, which is a very interesting idea to take away. Having support from other departments that maybe have done other things so they can expand our ways of doing things, to run a fun and visually engaging survey. And it had the highest response rate. So congrats. Let's see.
I also really like this point that Benjamin is sharing in the chat, that like about being creative with your data points. Like, of course, if you just ask people about, hey, did you do this behavior, they're probably going to say yes, right? Especially if it's a training that you need to do as part of your I don't know, curriculum, or because you're an employee somewhere. So Benjamin's point is also to look at observed, well, I guess you're talking about observing actual behavior and actual like behavior that you can see, but also that managers can report, or business metrics that can show you anything or tell you anything about if the behavior actually changed. So thanks for that comment, Benjamin.
Yeah, Natalie, go ahead.
I have a question related to some of my contents that I am deep in design mode right now for a new leadership development program. And I have a question just really about kind of starting small as it relates to like the change management and kind of receptiveness of the organization. So I'm piloting kind of the idea of habit building compared to just skill development for a small cohort of people managers. And I'm curious from the behavior perspective, like I'm getting a little bit creative with this, like it is going to have a little bit of like gamification, like exploring and discovering and being really action oriented. So I'm curious from like either of your experiences or anyone else here, like when I think about starting small and I think about the receptiveness of this people manager community to this probably being new, right? Like a lot of people haven't done some of those experiential, truly focused on like the behavior change piece. I'm just curious to hear like feedback on like what has worked well for you in starting small there to kind of incrementally get people on board.
I'll just go ahead and answer this one. I think, well, this is always the thing with behavioral science, so many questions. The answer should be, it depends. It depends on the people that are in your group. It depends on the behaviors that you're trying to change. But I think what's really important for people to be engaged and really get involved is by trying to show them how this is relevant for them. So what is the value for them? What is in it for them? And this can be on a business perspective, but it can, or a professional perspective, but it can also be on a personal level. So really trying to not only tell them, but also make them feel or experience why this initiative is beneficial and helpful for them. And then also maybe coming back to a few of the points that I mentioned earlier, like try to involve them early on so they can also bring their input into how you're designing the whole initiative. Like if they have their own ideas of what they think is fun to do, and they see that you're taking their feedback, putting that into your program, and then they kind of co-designed it with you, then they're probably a bit more likely to be engaged. Because of course they designed it themselves. So who's then not gonna do it anymore? Maybe that helps.
Okay, Natalie, I'm gonna guess it's okay. And if anyone else has other ideas, please feel free to write in the chat as well. Christian has a question. Christian, do you want to go off mute? Your question was, could you share with us some study cases in which you apply these solutions? If you want to go off mute and share with us exactly what you're referring to. Let's see.
You have case studies to share with us in order to give us examples in companies or in any context you have applied these solutions.
What solution are you referring to?
Do you have examples in which you have applied these solutions in different companies or organizations?
Is it like the whole behavior design process, Christian, just to make sure that we understand the question?
Yeah, that could be.
Awesome.
So one example that's probably top of mind because I just talked about it as well is this situation where there was a problem with how data was put into a system. Let me just quickly think about another one. I did work on a different project that also had to do with filing for data that was for a bank, where people had to like the person that's going to approve, like say yes or no, this bank client can get a mortgage. Like they need to file so many documents, put them in a system, and then someone else is going to check it. And there had a little bit of a similar problem as I just described. Like the files were not all complete, and that was not necessarily because of the incentive structure that was wrong or misaligned, but it was because people thought, okay, I have like 5 out of 8 documents that I have, and I'm just going to put them into the system already, so I saved them there. But actually then it went into the system as this is submitted, but then later on someone saw, oh, it's only 5 out of 10 forms. Well, I won't go into all these important details, but the problem was not necessarily about training people how to do it right, but it was about figuring out why people were doing this in the first place. So we were doing a lot of interviews with people who were filing these documents, and then we figured out that it was, like I said, they kind of use it as a way to save the documents rather than saving them somewhere else on an external or like an internal, but a different location. We then, by the insights from the interviews, like there were a few other things about like having a checklist and whatsoever, but based on the interviews that we did, we figured out that we were not going to design a training or an e-learning course, but we were actually going to redesign something in the system to support people in how to make it easier for them to file all these documents, and therefore file them correctly right away instead of doing first half document. So yeah, here you saw that the question was, please come and design a course or an e-learning for people to do this right. But after doing some research and really trying to get to the bottom of the problem, we figured out that it wasn't really a knowledge or a skill thing. It was really more about how the system was designed. So we ended up changing that.
No, I want just very quickly to make a point here. I think it's a lot about partnerships in the organization as well, because, okay, we, let's say we do the diagnosis and we realize this is not a knowledge problem. So maybe the whole discovery process should be done in partnership with other people who are in charge of that process being efficient, or that goal in overall, so that if we discover it's not a knowledge problem, they are already on board and they've heard their answers from the target audience, and they know there's something that needs to be done on their side, maybe process optimization. Sometimes it's about tools and so on. So thank you for the example. And Laura is asking, does the program include practical exercises and use cases with this word operationalizing of desired behaviors in different organizational contexts? Rose, can you?
Yes. Yes, we do have, no worries. Yes, we do have a lot of exercises. We really try to make it interactive. So we find it boring to listen to people for 2 hours straight. So that's why we want to design a little bit different. So we're trying to add some interactive parts into it as well. Yeah, I'm not sure if I should say this. We do have some homework, but it's fun. And it's a way to really, practice what you preach or something, like to put what you learn in the course and what you practice with in the interactive elements within the training, within the 2-hour sessions, and take that to your own context and take a behavioral problem from your own work situation or from your personal life, and try to apply what you learn in the course to that specific problem. Because then that's actually also fun, because then the week after you can say, well, I tried this, but then run into this issue, or like I have a question about this, and that also facilitates the whole learning. But I probably shouldn't have to tell all the L&D experts in the room how learning works. So we're really focusing on the behavioral design process. Yeah. Yeah.
Awesome. Well, I have the nasty job of being the timekeeper as well today, and I'm very aware of time. We will share the recording of the presentation. Some of you have written to me in like direct messages. You will get the recording of the presentation, and you will get the presentation as well as the follow-up in the next couple of days. We will drop Rose's LinkedIn as well. Just if you want to follow her, she's always sharing like really great nuggets of wisdom. Sam as well. We will like paste a couple of links you can follow if you're interested in this topic and deepening your knowledge, including our program, of course. Thank you so much for being with us, for sharing your lessons learned and thoughts and your questions. Thank you so much, and hope to see you soon.